Thank you. Recording. All right, Owen. Now you're on.
Yeah, I just say it's the specific pathway to get what you're trying to get to.
Sure. And what you're trying to get to would be considered what? What would you call it? Flint, what would you call the thing that I'm trying to get access to would be considered what? A
Service?
well, the web server is the service.
Resource?
Resource, right? It's a resource. And it's no different than you getting access to your local folders and files on your Mac. The minute you delve into the folder structure and you get to the file becomes the resource, right? It contains the information. The folder contained other folders that contain the actual resource that contains the information, right? So the routes are the pathways to the resource that we want to request from the server. Cool. So we're going to jump into our afternoon. Any other questions? Anyone have any other questions, comments?
I have a question. So
Sure.
like with a traditional web server like Apache, you can serve just like a regular HTML file. So in this type of environment here at the Node.js, is that something that you can do, or you'd actually have to do how we're doing it with the route to actually serve that HTML file?
Yeah, exactly, Christian. We need to hit a route, and once we hit the route, we will then render back some sort of HTML file. So in the end, your client machine needs it delivered to it as HTML, right? Your browser only understands HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It doesn't understand anything else. And so there's going to be additional commands that we're going to use. I haven't used the additional commands, but other commands that we would use here could be res.json. That's another command. There's res.render, which is another command. I'm going to just comment these out because this will error out, but they also take information. So res.json does exactly what you expect it to do, returns JSON. Res.render renders something, and it's really used for templating. We didn't get into this yet, but it's really the templates that we need to create. When we're doing server-side rendering of HTML, a lot of the times now we're walking down the road of multiple requests for them to aggregate bits and pieces of an HTML page and move them together. Like, oh, I'm going to grab the header. I'm going to grab the footer. I'm going to grab the body. I'm going to package it as index.html, and then I send it to you. And render is the method that we use for templating. And we'll get that. We will not do this. There's no way that we're going to be using res.send to send full-blown HTML files. That's not how it works. Send just allows you to send whatever you want, but it's not an efficient way to run your web server. So we have to install additional templating tools. Express is a web server, but Express also needs a little bit of help from templating tools that allow us to build out HTML templates that we can then aggregate. We can create pieces of a page and just tie those pieces together and then send or render the template that's being requested as per that route. Cool? All righty. All right. More questions. Let's rock and roll this big bad boy here. All right. So we're moving in to, just going to close these. Oh, cancel. Let me save this. Want to clear this out so we can stay focused on this. So we're going to be moving into URL and query parameters. And we're going to learn to read the URL parameters. So our routes are going to accept input. We're going to be able to use our route to actually send information along with the request for a specific resource, we can send it a filter to say, not only do I want this resource, but I want to give you some information that's going to help you filter the material and send back a very specific resource based on some sort of parameter that I've defined, okay? We'll take a look at some of the errors that you'll get with two responses. I'm trying to capture the errors here so you'll always see them. We can only do res dot something one time. You can't do res dot send and res dot JSON and res dot send again. You can't do it. There is a, I request something, you respond back, and that's it. You cannot respond back multiple times, okay? As well as the client requires a response. If you don't respond back, the client browser just hangs there and just kind of like waits and waits and waits till you get a timeout. We'll take a look at placing these routes in order. Think of routes to a certain extent like an if, else statement, right? The order of those conditions are very pertinent, right? The more specific conditions should be at the very top. The least specific conditions should be at the bottom, because if a condition can fall into both, then if you put the general one at the very top, it'll always hit, not the very specific one. So if I put the very specific one at the top, then it's this one will get hit when we want that very specific thing versus it falling into this general category. And the routes also follow suit. Routes must be placed in a specific order. Otherwise, one that is too general will kick off before one that is more specific. Then we'll work in multiple parameters. I want to send additional information to you, to the server, and the server might be like, hey, you can send me more filters. Tell me as many things as you want me to filter, and I'll filter those. We'll look at the request object once again. We did look at the request object earlier and the response object. We'll take a look at URL queries as well. And then just a little bonus here on setting up our server for environmental variables, which means we can set some keywords in a file and then reference those keywords throughout our application. And then our application would know the values stored inside of those environmental variables, which means we just create a variable and we elevate it to the scope of like global within the application, which means anything in the app can always reference this, because we're going to have multiple files, and having multiple files means that those files don't really talk to one another unless you told them to talk to one another. They're really segmented entities, and that's good. That's fine. And if we need to import one functionality into another, we have to use does anybody remember the keyword that we used to import something in Express? What was the keyword? Begins with an R.
Require.
Require was the keyword, right? So require was that first thing that we did here, require. That's how we import functionality. We can use the require keyword to import like software-based things as well as files. I could require a data object to be imported as well and then have access to it in this particular JS file. So let's take a look at kind of URL parameters. All right, so what's a URL parameter? Like, you know, if you go to any site, if you went to like, they're using here, like, think of Google with like 300 million products. And if you do anything, if you just went to, I don't know, Amazon, I haven't been in Amazon in a while. I'm going to look up Pint skateboard. Pint skateboard. I don't know if anybody's seen this thing. This thing is insane and I want it. I got an electric skateboard and I love it. There's a little Pint one. I don't know if they have it here, but just say there's like a skateboard or something. You'll see up here, right? Here's Amazon, and then here's the URL, right? It extends to these skateboards, then this DP, and then this thing. And so we can keep going, and now we see RF is equal to this. Then we see this question mark, and then we see that this is possibly some sort of filter, right? Because it's like question mark. I think you're most used to seeing that if you went to like Google. Right? If I went to Google and I just did, you know, Express.js, and I did that, you'll always see this. Search, question mark, and then the filters that we're using to find the express thing, whatever it is. That I just typed in this, and it says, you know, source is equal to HP, and EI is equal to this. I don't really know what that means. And then Q is equal to Express.js, which is probably the query that I actually typed in, right? This is probably the query, but we have this other information, okay? So what we can do is, I don't know if these routes here, part of this route is an actual route like some data, like this, or it's accepting this as kind of parameter-based data, right? I mean, this is hard-coded. This says some data, which means if we go to the server, we type / some data, it's literally translated into some data, right? There's no misinterpretation here. It's expecting a route where you manually typed in some data. I can't type in none data or some datas. That's not a route. That doesn't exist. I need you to type in this, and by you typing in this, I can actually do something, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up another server. So this is good for our first server. I'm going to go in, okay? I'm going to go out of that server. So first server, right? I'm going to do ls minus l so you can, oh, is it ls minus l? No, what is it again? I wanted to list out the files. Oh, never mind. So I'm going to make a directory, and I'm going to call this directory express _ plants. Okay? So I'm just going to create here express plants. We know that if we want to use this as a server, we need to do a few things. So I'm going to go into change directories into express plants. There's nothing in there. So the first thing that I'm going to do, what should be the first thing that I do now? There's nothing in there. What's the first thing that a Node application should really have as its starting point?
Don't you have to do the npm init?
Correct. And doing npm init will produce a, Jacob, what does that produce? npm init produces what?
I have no idea.
Ian, what does it produce? Help Jacob out. It's going to randomly pick on people. People are going to be like, what the hell is he doing, man? Matt never does this. All right. Ian's like,
don't we need to create a server.js file first?
We do need a server file, right? But the first thing that we did the last time was this, npm init.
The Fraser file.
Yeah.
The overall
it's like
file.
our configuration file for the server. So if I do npm init, it's going to ask me a bunch of information. Oh, what happened? It covers it likely. Oh, yeah. So didn't happen. It actually says here's the name of the package, the version of the package, the description of the package, right? And once again, I could type whatever I want here. I could say an app about plants. What's your entry point? Do we want it to be index or do we want it to be something else? What was our entry point in our previous app? And Ian was right. It was the name of that file. Server.js. That was our entry point. I'm not going to use any test commands here. I don't have a Git repository right now. I don't want any, maybe, I don't know, plants or plant. What's the author? I don't know, Joe Keohan, he's the author. Am I using licenses? Sure, why not? Boom. And there you have what is going to be our package JSON file, right? So I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to expand this. It's not there yet. It won't be there until boom, now's our package JSON. And our package JSON has all the information that I included. The name, express plants. He gave us the version. I'm just going to put it right here. We have the description. We have the main, the entry point, which is server.js. We have scripts. Scripts we will use later. We're not using it right now, but scripts allows us to add a few commands there to start our server under different conditions, okay? We also have keywords. I put plants. I have the author and the license, right? So now I have what is our package JSON file. What's missing here? What's the thing that we're going to see when I install Express? What are we going to see? Josh, what am I going to see once I install Express? What magically appears here in our package JSON?
I don't know.
Okay.
Express version?
Express
module?
node modules. All right. What else is going to appear in the JSON file? Molly, what's going to appear in the JSON file? It's a new key. Dependencies. We're going to see a new key in here called dependencies. Okay. So I'm going to install Express now because I will use it on my server. So why not just install it now? So I would just do npm I express and it'll install it. Package, here's node modules and dependencies just magically appeared here out of nowhere. I didn't do it. It just came, right? The only thing I did was type in npm install express and it created the node modules folder and it installed dependencies, which once again, now that I have this, if I get rid of node modules and I delete it, and I was to go back to my terminal and all I do is this, npm I, without dictating the application that you want to install, npm I is a default that says look inside package JSON, look inside dependencies, and install every app that is there and every dependency that that app needs and every dependency that that app that depends on blah, 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 right? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do this. You'll see package JSON magically come back. I'm sorry, node modules came back, okay? So that's important to note that we have a dependency keyword here, all right? So now that I have this, the next thing would be to do what? Justin, what's the next thing? I want to kick up a server, but what am I missing? It's the one file. Justin, that was you, yeah. What am I going to...
What file are you missing?
Yeah,
your
what file?
server.js?
Yeah, server.js. So I'm going to touch my server.js file. All right? Now, once again, server.js has nothing inside of it. It's a very manual process. You know, that being said, there are, once again, when you create your server and you have a server that meets your expectations of what you think servers that you should spin off in the future should have, all the tools that you're used to, you will save it as a template and you will use it. And there's other templating tools out there also. There's an Express generator that generates up an Express file, but we don't want to go that route because it installs so much stuff that's above and beyond your understanding of this. When you understand this, you can take that leap, right? So we know that if we're here, the first thing we need to do is to deal with our dependencies, right? Okay. Uppercase data. So the first dependency that we need to do is const express is equal to the require keyword, and it imports the express module. So require imports something. The something in this instance is the express module, okay? So now that we have that, we have the express, the next thing we need to do is spin up a new application. Does anybody remember what this returned? What Express actually returned back?
A function.
A function, correct. A function that needs to be called in order to like elicit the thing that's inside of it. So const app is equal to express. And now we've elicited that function to run, and that function actually returns to us something, right? Return to us in an object because we're going to be doing app.gets, right? And app.something insinuates that it's an object. Okay, so we're going to do this. I'm going to now also create, before I put any of my routes, which I should have, actually, no, but let's do a route. So I'm going to do maybe app.get, let me just put here, routes, right? App.get, get being the method. That's the routes, the default server. Like if you go to the name of our site, whatever it is with no additional information, that represents the default route, okay? This default route, this thing here takes in, this get is a method, which means it's a function, and it takes in 2 parameters. It takes in 2 arguments. The route that you're hitting and a callback function, another function. So that other function takes in a request and a response keywords, right? And then we must reply with something. Res.send, and then we can say something like, hello there. Hello to the plants website, right? I just want to make sure that this thing works. Now that I save it, if I try to run this right now, let's just see, I am missing something really key here. Well, let's just take a look and see. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to run this, and I'm going to, I don't know, I'm just going to do NodeMon, right? By itself, let's see. And NodeMon's like, all right, cool. It started it. It looks like it's waiting. And I want to go to that server. So what do I type in here? I want to go to that server. What do I type in? Localhost what?
3,000.
All right, so I'm going to put here 3,000, but why can't the site not be reached?
It's not listening.
Exactly. There is no app.listen, right? Without the app.listen, it's not listening on an actual port number, right? And here we could just say the port that we want to listen on, 3,000, right? We tell it to listen on port 3,000. Now I made changes to the server. NodeMon was already like watching. It's always watching. It's like Big Brother, you make a change. It's going to like restart the server. Let's take a look now. And now it works. Now my server works, okay? So I'm going to put here the listener. This is what our server is listening in on. Now, a lot of the times when you write this server or you write this listen also takes an anonymous function. And a lot of the times we just do this, you know, console log and just say listening on port. And then we'll say whatever the port is, 3,000, okay? Which means now, if I were to stop the server, see how it says listening on port 3,000? Why did this come out of nowhere? What do you think caused that? How did that appear there in the terminal? What was the natural?
When you saved the change, it automatically restarted the server.
Bingo. And because it restarted the server, this console log then gets executed, right? So a lot of the times you do this because you might be creating all these little servers for testing purposes and give them different port numbers. So when I start my server and I haven't looked at my server.js file, sometimes it's nice to know what port it's listening in on. And so this is a good indication of the port, right? I mean, if you wrote it in there, there's a good chance that that's the port that it's listening in on. Awesome. So what we want to do here is create another route. That was our default route. That's good. That's our default route. And I'm going to just put here that, you know, that represents the default route. Okay? That's just the server gets up and loaded, go to the port, that's what it listens to. Now, I want to create another route, a very unique route, and I want to use a URL parameter. Okay? So I'm going to say, yep.
Can I interrupt you a second?
Sure, yeah.
Can you back up and explain to me why we made the app.listen into, like, why did we add the arrow function?
Oh, so app.listen can take in 2 parameters, okay? The first one is the port that it should be listening in on, and that's kind of required, right? The server needs to be told what to listen on. The second one is optional. The second one is like, hey, after you've like configured the port to listen in on, do you want to do anything else? And we're like, yeah, I kind of want to tell the person who started up the server what port to listen in on. Maybe we have a log file that captures how many times the server has been restarted. Maybe a message gets sent to someone here when the server gets started. It's a mechanism by which we can configure a one-time action to happen when the server actually gets up and starts listening. Okay? It's not required. This is not required at all. Okay? The only thing that's required is app.listen and the port. That's required. Adding this additional function is an optional thing for you as a developer to run extra things one time only, right? Once the server started, that's it. App.listen will never run again unless someone goes in and edits the file and NodeMon is listening, okay? Most of the time, you're not going to have NodeMon sitting there up on the web listening. That's not how it happens. Your server loads and your server stays on unless somebody comes along and says, hey, we got to reboot the server, which is not something people enjoy doing, right? You reboot it because something's wrong, something broke, somebody added code, and then you just pray to the development gods that when the server restarts, the thing works. Okay, so when it's running, that's awesome. When you restart it, there's a chance the thing may not restart. So everyone's like this when they do it, okay? I'm just saying, I've seen servers, or I've been using CodePens for a long time for my evening class, and the other day, CodePen just kept breaking on everyone. And because they did an update. They pushed up this update, the server restarted, and this thing just made things go haywire. Server started, but it caused a lot of problems. So that means they have to fix it, restart. Well, once again, if you're working on a project and the server restarts, that's going to be a problem for you, right? That help explain what we're doing with this additional function?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. It's just optional. This thing is just optional. So let's just say I'm going to create another route, a completely different route. And I'm going to say this is going, I'm going to maybe say index of plants array. Okay, that's the route. Okay, and this will find a specific plant in the plants array. All right, just reading this thing, you can see that there's a new thing, a colon. We haven't seen the colon there used. Like, this is new. All right, cool. I got this colon. What is that colon? Well, this becomes a URL parameter, right? So this is a URL parameter using, and I'm going to say here, URL parameter, okay? And this is the parameter. The colon represents the parameter. URL parameter is represented by the colon index of right? Okay. So I'm going to create this thing, right? I'm just leaving a lot of comments. So I'm going to say app.get index of plants array, right? It takes in a route and it takes in the callback. The callback is almost always written as rec-res. You could write it the full-blown request response. This is a function. We're using an anonymous function, and we're going to do. What's that?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there a technical reason why you don't just type in AF enter for all these arrow functions and why you're typing them all out, or is that just personal preference?
You know, that's just kind of habit. Like, I should be doing that. Yeah. I like that you pointed it out. I just get so used to like typing it out. I'm going to do res.send. And then I'm going to look for something. So I'm just, first, let's say, we all know that there's nothing here yet. Right? I don't have an array of anything. So I'm going to say, hey, you hit the, index of plants array route. That's all I want to say. So I know that it works, right? I haven't even tested the server yet. I'm just kind of like putting a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to go here and start up the server, and let's just make sure that this thing works. Now, it did restart because I have listening on port has been added, so I know that this is. So I'm going to go back here. Once again, the server runs, hello to the plants website, and I'm going to say, all right, I'm just going to hit, like, I don't know, index. What if I just do that? Look, look, I get back at index. You hit the index. All right, so what if I do this? Hello. I still hit it. If I say goodbye, I still hit it. Now here's the thing, here's the catch. The reason why I can change this to be any value that I want is because this represents a URL parameter. Whatever the user types in after the default route will be grabbed and converted into its value. Okay? Let's just believe that it's going to be converted into its particular value. So I want to know what its value is. Okay? So I'm going to do this. Watch. You hit the route, right? Res.send, you hit the route. I'm going to use backticks here so I can do string interpolation and I can include something. So I'm going to say, hey, you hit the route. Well, what's inside this route? Well, what's inside this URL parameter? I'm going to do rec.params.index of plants array. Okay? I'm going to expand this a little bit. Sweet. I'm going to save this, and I know my server has restarted again, right? Listening on port. Awesome. Now watch. It says goodbye, right? Goodbye. I'm going to say hello. Hello. I'm going to say whatever. It says whatever. What it's doing is it's capturing whatever you type in here and using it as some sort of parameter. We are literally passing some sort of information to the server that it can then use to do what it needs to do. As of right now, we're not doing anything with it, but returning it back, right? That's what we're doing. So what I want to point out here is what kind of thing is params? What type of data type is it?
It's an object.
It's an object, right? Because it has a dot, and then we are outputting a value. So let's just take a look at the thing, right? What are we looking at? So I'm going to say maybe here I had res.send. I'm going to try doing this. I am going to just comment that out, and let's do this. Res.send rec.params. Let's see what that looks like on the screen. Okay? It's an object, right? So rec.params becomes an object, and where did we get this value from? Who could tell me?
URL parameter?
Correct. That represents this, and then this represents the value that you passed it, right? It's almost like you're creating a variable. Let index.plantsArray is equal to whatever, or whatever it is that we put in here. If I do change this to be anything, it becomes anything, okay? So just know that rec.params, and I'll just put it here, rec.params is an object, okay? That's what it is. And it's going to be an object that contains the URL parameter as the key and the value that you passed in as the value, okay? So that's what we're doing here. I'm just having you see that that's what we're passing. So I'm going to take this and I will put it right up here so these two have some consistency, okay? That makes sense what we're doing so far? The ability to pass the server some information, right? Now that it has a specific string to work with that's dynamically added based on the user, we can then use this thing to access information on the server, right? And once again, it could have been anything. I could have typed in, I've been typing in strings. I could type in the number 10. I could type in a Boolean. So I could say, I don't know, true. I get true. I don't think we can't type an object in here. I don't know. I don't think we could. Val, true. I don't think that that's going to work. Is it? Oh, it works. You wouldn't do that, but it works. You see how it's doing it? We can pass information. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, I'm going to go back just to the default. Awesome. So what are we actually trying to do, right? The thing that we're trying to do is get a backup plant. So I'm just going to copy this const plants because that's That's a lot. I don't really want to type it. So here's our dependencies. This isn't really a dependency, but it is something we need. So I'm going to kind of put it up here. And so I have these flowers, these plants, right? Now, how do we get access to something that's in the array? How do we do that? Arrays are what? Arrays are what based? They are, begins with a P. I get it based on its. I know, I'm surprising everyone. They're like, oh my God, where's my volume? I gotta get my volume. All right. Position, Thad. Thank you. It's based on the position.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even realize you had said me. Said
Yeah,
my name.
all right. That's what I was like. What happened to Thad? He's not responding.
Science in there.
All right. So you were correct, Thad. You were thinking it. I knew you were thinking it. I'm just speaking your mind.
Yeah.
Position is how we get something back, right? So when I say index of plants array, I want a number. So now I'm going to go back here, right? I'm not going to do this res.send just by itself anymore. I just did that so that you would see that's what was captured. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to undo this. And for this, I'm not just going to send this console log anymore, right? This kind of information. What I'm going to do is send plants. I'm going to grab the plants array, and I expect that within rec.params, you're going to give me a number. And that number is going to be stored in index of plants array, right? That's what I expect. I expect you to get me that. So I'm going to save this. And let's say we want Montera de Sosa. That was brutal. There we go. Boom. Okay, what's the next plant? Corpse flower. I give it the number 1, corpse flower. Right? Elephant foot. I give it elephant foot 2. Okay? We can keep doing this until we maybe run out of flowers. Like, I don't know, is there a element in the 5th position? No, there's nothing there in the 5th position, so we get nothing because there is no, right? You'd have to put conditional logic in here to be like, all right, if the value that you gave was greater than the length of the array minus 1, then just tell them you're looking for something that does not exist, okay? So what we're trying to convey here is that you can pull in a particular value or pass a value to the server. So not only can the route be an access to resource, but we can kind of define dynamically the resource that we want, okay? And this became the resources at any point in time. I could do that. Because the other way to do something like this would have been to do something like this, like app.get, and then I could have said, you know, what was the name of the, I'm going to try to get some of the easy file, corpse flower. So I could have said, hey, corpse flower, right? And then rec, res, and then I could have said, hey, res dot send, and then just grab the element from there. I know it's at 0, 1, so I could have said, hey, plants 1, right? I could have done that, and I would have got corpse flower. But now I have to reproduce this thing for every one of these, and that becomes a lot of work, right? The need to like, all right, I got to do the next one. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to do elephant foot, which means I got to do, all right, you want not corpse flower, you want elephant foot, right? And that one's at position 2. And now I got to do that. You see how that would become very tedious over time, right? What if our application knew the positions of the elements in the array? We could just ask for the position, and we could use one thing to do that, okay? This is interesting because when you did the card game, right? The flip game that got you into the program, right? You created something using a data ID element, and you used the position of the element in the array to reference it later on. So there was information about the elements that was sent to us in the HTML that was stored in the HTML, and it was its position in the array that was sent to us, okay? So this does have some impact here. But we don't need these. I'm going to get rid of these. I just put them there for the sake of you seeing the manual labor that would be involved if we had to do all that. Okay? So, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to pause. I'm going to let you catch up to this point. Okay? Create your server. Get it up and running. Now put here. Once again, this is just a good time to like watch and then do. It's always like everybody wants to code immediately along, but coding along doesn't mean you got it. You know, when you got it is when you actually reproduce it on your own. If you can do it from memory, great. If you can't do it from memory, then you still don't understand it yet. Click on, what are we going to go for? Click on. Okay. Click on the diamond when you're done.
Hey, Joe, can you just show us your code on there?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. It's going to get rid of some of these spaces. So this is pretty much all of the code. Right, I do have this const up here. I'm just trying to get it all into one so you can see it all. There you go. There's all the code. Don't forget package JSON.
So here you have two folders, Express something and then first server.
Correct.
And you need to be inside the one that you want to run. Otherwise, you won't know where to go.
Yeah, you have to be inside of it. So when you run nodemon from inside of here, it will look for package JSON. And inside of package JSON, it will look for main. And it will run the server file that you told it to run.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I mean, if you started from instructor examples, directly from instructor examples, what would it do?
Oh, I would go into Express Plans. So I would have to go into, so let me just open it up. So say I stop my server, right? I'm gonna Control C. I'm gonna do an LS and I see Express Plans. If I do PWD, I see that the full path to this is instructor examples, Express Plans. If I go back one directory and I do an LS now, I see I'm at the level where the two files exist. If I do nodemon here, nothing's gonna work because there's no package JSON in there, right? There's no server.js file. There's no package JSON for it to look at. So I need to go into the folder. And there we go. I see the different folder, the different files. And now if I do nodemon, it'll start up the server.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Joe?
Yeah.
So after you're doing this res.send for the plants array, what should we be getting on our actual local host? Nothing? Or
No, so if you have the plants array here, so I copied and pasted the plants array, right? If you have the plants array, so I'm just going to go here because it's a more concise version of it. If you have this plants array and you pass in a number of something at a position that exists, you should get back the name of the thing.
I wasn't sure if we were supposed to get like the whole thing or if we were just supposed to get the number.
You could, if you wanted to get all of the plants, like if you really wanted to get all of them on this default route here, we could say, let's just send plants. Then you can get a list of them. Let's see if this works. See? And then I can make a decision. Oh, yeah, I want witch's butter. So I'm going to choose position 0, 1, 2, 3. And I'm like, oh, witch's butter, that's at the 3rd position. So I do that, boom, and I get it.
Really flower names? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I gotta be honest, I didn't make up this lecture. I think
I'm just curious, like, what kind of flowers? Witch's butter.
Yeah.
Some of those are real flowers. I don't know about all of them, but I like to garden, so I'm familiar with a few of those.
I know corpse flowers because one of my students created some app with flowers, and they wanted to like show people flowers and the different unique flowers. So corpse flowers. So I'm just assuming, elephant foot yam sounds like a yam. That's plants too. So maybe it's not just flowers, right? Witch's butter.
They just had a corpse flower bloom here, and it's like one of the most foul-smelling things in the world.
There we go. We should put that in there.
Like it was like all over the news here. Like, come visit at the conservatory because you'll never smell anything like this ever.
I heard about that. It was big news, and I was just like, yeah, I think I can pass. I don't need to smell that.
Why would you voluntarily go? Like, I don't understand.
People do all sorts of stuff. You know what? My son watches YouTube all the time, and on YouTube they'll have those challenges where somebody will eat cinnamon, and you can't really eat a spoonful of cinnamon, or they'll like do dumb stuff where they'll eat the hottest peppers, and you watch these people like in pain. You literally see them in pain eating like one of the hottest
thing for a while there.
Yeah, it's just, and they get hits. People watch them. Next thing you know, he's getting 1 million hits, and he just made some money that day doing some dumbass thing. And we're trying to develop. We're not trying to do a dumbass thing. We're trying to develop. All right. So I got 8 so far. Still waiting for.
Jeremy, what is that you just posted? What flower is that?
The witch's butter.
That's the witch's butter. Okay.
Yeah.
That is pretty weird looking, gotta say.
Oof. It's really cool how when Node did come out, it allowed JavaScript developers to write a server in JavaScript, which allowed people that were really like solid with JavaScript now to have a whole server written in just the JavaScript language. When before Node, you had to have a server up and running in like, I don't know, PHP or Rails, which runs on the Ruby language, or Django, which runs on Python. You needed to have it run on these other platforms with another language that you had to learn. So you had to be proficient in these other languages when if you're using just JavaScript and you want to master JavaScript, now you have a platform that allows you to build a web server specifically in the JavaScript language, which means the proficiency level of JavaScript increased. Because now people are building things in JavaScript only. And I know it's, early. We're still waiting for a few people, so I'm just going to give you my spiel. I know it's early to maybe look for positions. I'm all about looking at the jobs that you want, whatever they are. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to apply for them until you graduate and then some, right? Look at the jobs and see what technologies they actually need or are part of their requirements. And then start focusing your attention on those technologies. You may come across an industry like finance, and, for 8 out of the 10 companies, they're like, we use, Python. And you're like, I want to get a job for them. So what does that mean? You kind of have to learn Python if that's what you want to do, right? You might work at another company and they're like, we use Rails, or this industry, 7 out of 10 companies use Rails. So you got to go master Ruby on Rails to get a job. Other companies are going to be Node and Express and React. So now you got to master Node, Express, and React to get those companies.
Don't we learn Ruby on Rails in this class or no?
Yeah, you do. And you learn React. I'm saying you're going to learn it all, Aaron. But the sooner you kind of focus your attention on what you want to pursue,
right,
the sooner you get there.
Makes sense.
Learning everything under the sun isn't going to make you a better developer, isn't going to get you the job that you want and the pay that you're hoping to achieve. Right? This is not just a job you want, but you also want to make the money as a developer. So in order to make that money, you need to have that skill set sharpened just a bit more than the person next to you. And the sharper that is, and the more demand the technology is that you're sharpening that skill upon, the more you're able to demand as a salary.
Or just really know how to talk yourself up.
At some point in time, your back is against the wall, and it's going to be like, all right, build it. And Aaron's like, shit, I really talked a big speech, but I can't do the thing. And then you're fired. So, I don't know. You can spiel your way in, like use human tactics to get you in, but definitely when time comes, have the skill set to deliver. Otherwise, you won't keep the job. It looks like we're at 14. If anyone else completed it, just click on that. What I think I'm going to do anyway, it's 3:30, so why don't we take a 10-minute break? That'll give whomever else is still chugging away at this a few more minutes to complete it. And then we'll come back at, say, 3:42. Okay. On break. Come back at 3:42. Sharp. Hopefully by that time everyone's caught up, and then we'll keep going. Okay, we got one more minute. Jump back on. URL parameters. Alrighty, is that it? Everyone good with their server? Any major catastrophes? Able to get what you needed? Awesome, awesome. So let's talk about some common errors that you are going to kind of encounter. One of them is using or including two res.sends. So you know what? I'm going to start with this. What if I got rid of the res.send? I'm going to take it out of here. I'm going to go back here, and I'm just going to go to the default route. Now, once again, default route gets hit. Nothing happens. I'll even just console log saying, you know, hit the default route. Default route. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go here. When I hit it, we should see it, right? Boom. All right. Where's my terminal? Hit the default route. What's happening here? How many times have you seen that happening? All right, that's not new for you, right? Anyone who's tried to get on. That's what happened to me earlier when I lost my internet. I was sitting there, everything was spinning around, nothing was being returned. What do you think this represents? I mean, if you know what it represents when you don't get access, what do you think this is really telling us right now? We're waiting for what?
We're waiting for the response.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're waiting for a response. And are we getting a response? No, because res.send has been commented out. So this will actually happen, and this will continue to happen, maybe like a minute or two. It all depends on, you know, the timeout that's been configured for that particular browser. I think for Chrome, maybe it's like 2 minutes, maybe a solid minute. I don't know. At some point in time, you'll get the page cannot be displayed. That's what we're going to get. So if that's what happens when you don't have a res.send, what do you think happens when we have two res.sends, right? So I'm going to go back here and be like, all right, awesome. I know that works. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do both. I'll put one below the other, right? And we know that the server restarted, right? It should have restarted already. Once I save it, right? Save, right? That's what you get when the thing doesn't work. All right, so let's do this one more time. Hit the default route. All right, so it sends back plants, but what else? Did it give us the other error? All right, so we got another error. Let me go here. What does this say? Cannot set headers after they are sent to the client, okay? This error means that you're trying to resend something back to the client after you've already sent them something. That's what this error message means, okay? So you can't do that. So I'm just going to put here, error, right? Errors, boom, okay? Cause, more than one res.send in the response, right? In the callback. How about that? Okay? Means you can't have this. This will cause this. Now we got the first one, and that's great. It's going to still happen. I mean, if I go back and I say, give me 3, all right, that works. If I go back to the main server, that still works. But this second one will never work, and it will always error out that you cannot, once you've sent something to the client, you cannot make the decision to try to send something again. You can't do this. That will produce an error. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. Don't do that. That's one error. Okay. If you do want to do that, just use an if statement. This is a normal code block. This is just JavaScript. I could say, hey, if this thing exists, then send that. Otherwise, do this, right? So let's just say I want to use this. I'm going to just copy that. I don't feel like typing all that out. Here's our array of plants, and I'm going to do that here, right? I'm going to put an if condition, and it'll say, hey, if this, then send that. Else, send another message, okay? That I can't find it. Here, we're trying to send 2 res.sends. Here, we're trying to send only one, but one that meets a condition. So if I go back here and I do 0, I get 1. If I do 5, I get cannot find anything at index 5, okay? This is normal JavaScript. This is why I love Node, because Node allows you just to write normal JavaScript. We understand if-else statements. They're pretty easy to understand, and you can include them in your code now. At res.send, I grab the parameters. We know that the param of this is stored in that object, okay? The other thing that you have to be aware of is that the routes, the order of these routes is very important. Now, between these two, which one is more generic? Color as a URL parameter or plants? Which one's more generic?
Plants.
I got one for plants. Anyone else want to weigh in? So I'm going to say.
Wouldn't it be color because we can have it be multiple things?
Correct. Because it's a URL parameter, it's more generic, being you could put any color you want in there. Of the 65 million colors, that thing could be any color. And then it could be anything you want. I could put numbers and letters, right? And Booleans and anything I want. Because I fat-fingered, I didn't pay attention to the directions. Plants is a very specific one. The minute I type in plants, there is no interpretation. There was no like, where'd you want to go? I want to go to plants, right? When you do color here, where you want to go is the default route, and I want to pass the server a color. Whatever that color is, I'm passing it the color. So between these two, the question would be, would plants ever get hit at all based on the order of these routes? Exactly. That's like, no. And you're right. No, they wouldn't. Plants would never get hit. Routes act like a big if-else statement. The first route that is matched is the winner. That's really what it is. So just think as routes. Now maybe I'll put here, routes are like if-else if statements. First one matched wins. So if I ever want plants to get hit, then I have to put it above color. I have to make sure they are manually going to type in plants, and that's very, very specific. So I want my most specific conditions at the very top. So if we went in here, we don't have another here. They have another one for awesome. So if I did this, I'm going to put another route here called app.get, and it's just called awesome. Right? That's what it is, awesome. And we'll do rec res. Okay. And now we'll do res.send. And here they're having us send this. And once again, I'm just going to copy this. I don't want to type in that full URL. Here we're sending in an H1, and we're sending an image tag with a link to one of these flowers, right? All right. So I want to go to awesome. That's where I want to go to. So I'm like, all right, man, I'm going to go to awesome. Look, number 5 still works. I'm just testing the route before it. That still works. Great. The default route works. Awesome. Now I want to go to the route that has awesome. Did I spell that right? Awesome. Yeah. Here we go. Whoa, what do you mean? I know there's a route that has awesome in it. I know that. Why are you telling me what's at the index? That's crazy. I'm not looking for something in an index. And that's because of the positions of these routes. If I take the awesome route and I place it above this one. Now, and I save it. Now when I do this, plants are awesome. I get it. But I'll also get this. If I do 2, I get elephant's foot yam. If I do nothing, I get everything. The order of these routes is key. And what that means is all of these URL parameters should be towards the bottom. If they're at the top, they're always going to run. So they are more generic than this. This is very specific about what you're trying to hit. This is very ambiguous. You know, I don't know. He's going to type in a number, a letter. I don't know. The user needs to know what to put in there as a number, right? If they don't, this takes so many things. Could be anything. So that's the other error. Is the order of them is very, very important. Now we also have the ability to pass in multiple parameters, multiple URL parameters. Each one of them is, here we go. I'm going to do this. app.get, and here they're saying hello /, first name /, last name. So we already know these are 2 URL parameters. We have our callback, rec, space, res. I like to put the spaces. Okay, and now we're going to say, hey, you know, console log. Let's console log rec.params so we know what we sent, right? We can even do this. I don't even need to console log that, right? I could say res.send. How about I just do this? Res.send, and then we'll comment it out. Okay, I'll send that first, and then we'll see what we get. So I'm going to go here. Cool. So it was hello, right? That's the route. Let's just see if I do this. Oh, it's giving me this. What is that? Did I not save this? Maybe I didn't save it because it could not find. Oh, because this route doesn't exist. Hello doesn't exist. We need to add first name and last name. So I need to do first name is I don't know, Joe, and I'll put here Schmo. Let's see. There we go. Joe Schmo. Okay. This matched a route. It matched this particular route here. The reason why this did not match is because this route here is looking for a / some value, a / and some value, and we did not provide it with 2 additional /, nor the value, which means this did not meet our condition, right? This met our condition because it has a / and it takes in anything that you give it, and so that works. Otherwise, you have to give it something. Whatever that something is, Joe, Joanne, and then I get the first name, last name. That's what we sent. Once again, if we wanted to, I could have done res.send, you know, use backticks, just say, hello there, you know, rec.params, first name. Here's the first name. Hello there, Joe, rec.params.last name. Here's last name. If we save this, and I comment this out, what happens here? This will never trip, right? Can't have 2 res.sends at all. So we're going to get rid of this one. Save it. Do this again. Bloop. Hello there, Joe Kieran. Okay? Just as much as you can take in one, you can take in multiple parameters. Okay? Then we have the request object. Well, we've already kind of taken a look at the request object earlier. I mean, we've sent request.params, but how about this? How about I create another route here? I'll just create one more. App.get rec obj, right? Rec res, and then res dot send the request object. Okay, I'm going to send the whole object to the screen. What's that?
You put rec twice.
Oh yeah, rec res response. Okay, cool. Because that would have errored out. I'm going to go back here, get rid of all this, and say, hey, rec obj, boom. Converting circular structure to JSON. So it can't convert this thing to JSON is really what it's saying, right? Stringify, can't do it. So I'm going to try doing this. Watch this. Let me see if this works. Nope, it's not able to convert the whole thing. So I'd have to console log this. Unless I do, let me see, JSON dot stringify. This isn't something we covered yet. So let me see if this works. If it works, cool. No, converting circular structure. So it won't allow us to do that. So let me just console log the rec object so we can see what it is, right? And if we go to the console, I go here, here is the object. This is it, incoming message, right? We saw this earlier. I showed this to you earlier. I showed you the request. If this was the response, what was this? Well, does anyone remember what the name of that was? It was like server message, server response, something like that. This is the rec. And then we have all these things for the request, okay? All of this is part of the request. Here's the server portion of it. So I'm not gonna go into it. I'm just kind of showing you. And this is hanging. Why is it hanging again? Any ideas?
It's waiting for a response.
Yeah, I didn't give it a response, right? Where is it? I just console log without a res dot, without one of these, hey there, it'll freeze. Now if I do it, I get hey there, okay? I just kind of want to bang through this so you guys can jump into the lab. I want to give you more time in the afternoon to do the lab. We have a query is also another way to get values, okay? So a query allows us to say, I want something specific, okay? And the value that I'm giving you is going to be stored in title. I'm going to give you something, and that something is you're going to store it in title instead of using these URL parameters, right? So according to this right now, if we were to do this, parameters and query, I'm not going to see, oh, if we ran this, we would see it. So I'm going to go here. Let's run another one. Once again, I'm getting a little bit more specific. I'm going to try to go back up here. I'm going to get rid of this one right here. So I'll just say, howdy, first name. This is uppercase. I'm going to try to follow what they have here. Rec. And we are going to do two console logs here. Console log, rec.params, and then console log, rec.query. Okay? And then we're going to respond. I'm just going to copy and paste this. And here we're just going to send hello. I'm going to grab the title and the params. The title is this. Okay? So let's do this. I'm going to take this, go up to my server, paste it, enter, and they cannot get Howdy Edinburgh. So let's take a look. What did I do wrong? First name. Here's Howdy. Did I not save this? Oh, you know what? Look, I didn't save the server. Server's not saved, so that route doesn't exist. So now I'm going to do this. There you go. Hello, Duke Edinburgh. Okay? Duke is the title, and obviously you can see that that's Duke. Edinburgh is the URL parameter that we passed in. So if we just compare these two, if I move this over here, I move this up, and we kind of compare the two, and I'll move this like this. Here's Howdy. That's a hard-coded thing, right? There's no mistaking you're going to Howdy. You could put whatever you want in the place of Edinburgh, and it would be interpolated here. It would grab it and do whatever you want with it. The question mark is a query string, and it's like, oh, you're going to store this Duke value in title. So title becomes kind of the variable name or the key of the key value pair. If we look at this in the console, right, let me just clear this. I'm going to run this one more time. Open up the console, because we were console logging it. So when I console logged it, this was rec.params, and this was rec.what? That was query, right here, query.title. Okay? Query is an object. Title is the key. Params is an object. First name is the key. It's just the way they accept these dynamic values that you're passing it. Both params and query are both objects, and they both store key value pairs. This key is derived from what's hard-coded in the URL right here. This key is derived a bit more dynamically from whatever you put in here, okay? If I change title here, it'll break my code because this is looking for something very specific called title. Okay, but I could change this value to be anything, you know, Archduke. If I did that, that should work. Archduke, right? If I changed Edinburgh, I don't know, I don't really know what to say. Joe, I'm just gonna put Joe. Archduke Joe. You see, it's very dynamic. Whatever you want to put in here, or whatever you want to put in here. Now, which one of these URLs do you think is more intuitive to the user as kind of knowing I'm passing values to the server that are part of like my query? Which one becomes more evident to the user? Would they know that this is something or that title is equal to Archduke? Like if you had to look at it, my assumption is you're going to look at it and you go like, title is equal to Archduke. Okay, that seems like I'm passing something. You wouldn't know Joe unless you started playing around with it, right? If this was hard-coded as Joe, you would never know that that was being derived on the server side as a parameter, because you would just see hard-coded Joe there all the time, not knowing that on the server it's like I'm listening on Howdy, listening for a URL param, and then I'm going to grab that value, whatever they put there. This is a bit more clear to the user, right? We saw that when we did the Google search, right? We just followed the string and you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. The user's not going to be able to tell from this what's happening, but they will be able to tell from that. Okay. Just going to hit the last thing here, environmental variables. One last thing. Okay. So the environmental variables are ways to create global variables, okay? So the variables that I have in this server right now are these up here, right? These three variables are global to server.js file. They're not global to the actual application, okay? If I created another file, that file would have no idea of these three variables. They are scoped to this file and live and die in this file only. But there are going to be times when we want to elevate variables to be more global in nature that can be used across any file that our server has. Okay, that being said, what we need to do is install, see here, a new package, npm install.env. So if I go, I'm going to open up my package.json so you can see the package.json, right? Because it should go there. I'm going to stop my server. npm install.env install. If I go here, we're going to see it. Just got installed right here. .env, okay? And if we went to, you know, the npm .env, just to take a look at it. What is it? Here we go, .env, it's a package. It tells you what it does. It's a zero dependency module that loads environmental variables from a env file into process env. Okay, it's like a lot of blah, blah, blah. How do we configure this thing, right? So let's go back here. I need to require something again, okay? Now, what's different between this require and how we might have set up this require? What's missing? Anyone tell me?
Declaring another variable.
Yeah, I'm not declaring a variable at all, right? I'm just kind of loading the thing up. So here I would do this. Require dot env dot config. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. Now, the one thing that's missing here is an env file. I don't have an actual env file. And that dot in this env file means what? What does the dot mean? We saw that earlier today.
It's hidden.
It's a hidden file. Just like on our first server, I had gitignore. I didn't add a gitignore file here, so I should, right? Because I have node modules. So I'm going to add a gitignore there. So I'm going to go to the terminal. And I'm like, cool, I'm in the terminal. And I'm going to do, I'm going to touch two files. I'm actually going to touch an env, bloop, and then I'm going to touch a dot gitignore because I want to have both of those files, right? Here's the gitignore from previously. All I'm going to do is just copy that, put that in this gitignore. Same content. I just don't want to push on my node modules. And then I have the env file. So what am I going to put inside of the env file? This is what I'm going to do. And this is very specific. Syntactically, we're going to use an uppercase here. And we're going to say port is equal to 3000. Okay. So what we're saying here is the port number, wherever the word port is used, it's going to instantiate 3000. That's what it's going to do. It's going to enumerate itself as 3000. Okay? I'm going to go back to my server. And in the server file, I'm going to do this. So I kind of instantiated this thing, right? I required it. I'm going to go const port is equal to process.env.port. And what we're doing here is kicking off .env so it can do its work. It's going to look for an env file. It's going to grab whatever values it sees in there and load them into process env. It stores them in here, okay? So env is what type of thing? What data type is env?
It's an object.
Object.
Like everyone's in the afternoon like, so tired already. It is an object. And so port represents this, right? I'm going to go back here. So that means anywhere inside of this application, I can reference port now because it contains the value stored in this port, right? And the only place that we have port is down here. So what I can do is replace the hard-coded 3000 with port. That's a variable. That variable contains the value 3000 because that value 3000 has been loaded here into the environmental variables. That was loaded by .env, and .env pulled that file or pull that information from env. Right? It's like all these little steps to get there. So I'm going to test this. Right? I made a bunch of stuff. Let's just make sure that our server isn't broken. I'm going to start my server, nodemon, return. All right, look, listening on port 3000. It's doing it. It's listening on the port. Now watch, just so that we see, I'm going to stop the server. I'm going to go into env, and I'm going to change this to 3001. Right? I'm going to go in here, And instead of saying listening on port 3000 hard-coded, I'm going to do backticks and say listening on port, single backtick. Now this message here shouldn't be 3000 anymore. It should be 3001. Watch. Boop. Boop. There we go. 3001. Okay, this is important where we store our environmental variables because there's going to be things later that when we push our server to Heroku, Heroku is going to grab the environmental variables and load those things into the global namespace that it has in its environment. So it's important, this env. Right now, we're just kind of doing this one small, tiny thing. The other thing we don't want to push up is our env file. We don't want to push that up. So in git ignore, I would actually add .env. Env will also contain passwords to things, so we don't ever want to push it up. Heroku, or whatever server we push it up to, will load those things, but it won't take the file, okay? It'll look inside of process.env and load all those things, but it will never, ever push this file up. We should never push that up, okay? So I think we got through it. Yeah. And here we're just saying if there's nothing in the port variable, like a process env doesn't have anything, use this other port. So this is just kind of a backup mechanism. Use another port. If I went back to the server, I could have said that up here. Hey, look inside there. If it has something, use it. Otherwise, use port 3000. Okay? We need a backup just in case somebody did not load something in here. This is our backup. This is our backup right here. Okay? Woo! That was a lot. Now you know how Matt feels up here when he's up here all day. I'm going to do this. All right, maybe it's a little late for me to be posting this. Just tell me how you're feeling. I want to get a feel. You're going to jump into the lab, so you're going to be working with this together. So I have a feeling like you're going to be able to pick this up kind of relatively easily as a group. You're working with each other. Sweet. Okay. It's okay to hang in there. It's okay. Once again, when I was learning this stuff, I was like, what the? It was a lot of stuff to learn. Cool. Looks good. You'll get the additional practice with the lab. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to Slack out the lab. But if there's anything, if you want me to spend 5-10 minutes answering any questions about what we did, by all means, I'll answer it. And in the meantime, I'm going to stop my server, commit my changes, push them up so that you could have reference to them, okay? So here I'm going to do, hey, git status. Woo! I got my first server, my other server, right? And then it tells me, hey, there's stuff in here. So if I go back one directory and now do a git status, boop, I see Express Plants has things, right? And I'd have to keep going back. So I'm just going to say git add, you know, everything, git commits, and push up Express Plants. I'm going to push, but I think there might be some new stuff up there. I think Jerica might have pushed something up. Oh no, she didn't push up anything. She did, I would have had to do a git pull to get the new changes and then push my changes. So now everything is up on the server. Everything that we did, instructor notes, right? And instructor examples is right here. Okay, so you have access to everything that we did in class. So do we have any questions on any of this?
I have like a really random question. Maybe I just missed it in the beginning today, but
Sure.
When is this used? Like, what are we doing this for?
Okay.
Like,
So I almost feel like I should have given context.
You're getting
Why-
the information and like what you're doing, but like why? Like why?
Okay. So you're a web developer now, right? and you're building out applications, correct? Now, you're not going to be building just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, right? That was to get you like working with the tools, but that's not how you're going to be building out a web application, okay? So the fact that you need some more functionality out of your application, we need the support of a web server. And this is our web server. And the web server, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the web server that we are going to ultimately be creating. But this web server needs to provide users and yourself as a developer the ability to access the resources on the server using, routes. Sometimes we have to be very dynamic with what we're accepting. And then once you ask for a resource, you will get that resource. And it's not going to be hard-coded here. Where do you think the data we would ultimately be pulling stuff from? I mean, if I went to Amazon, where do you think Amazon is storing all of the images and product names? Where do you think that information is?
On their Amazon web server?
Yeah, in some sort of huge database, right? So you make a query to the database sends you the information, and then you display it. Think of this as layer one of us creating the front-end interface so that our users can connect with the rest of our application. We still need to install a database. Well, we did. We installed Mongo. We still need to configure a database to store data, and we have to access that data, and then we have to render that data. So this is our web server, the server that is going to support our web application. Otherwise, we don't have something to render out to the world. That help, Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. It's like, we're doing all these things, and like, I don't really know. Like, what's all these routes? When are we going to use them? You will use all of this from this point on when you're building out applications, okay? So just know if you're ever going to have a front end and a back end, a server that supports all of the resources, all of the services, then you need something like Node and Express to do that. I'm feeling any other?
Joe, I have a question.
Sure,
As far as like establishing variables, should the common practice always be to establish them as constants, or?
Yeah, so in here, we're never going to be redefining port, right? Server starts, it should be only that thing. This variable here, this const, we're never going to be, in this instance, we're not reassigning plants to be a new array, but we might add and remove things from the array, correct? We could do that. This should never be reassigned because that's our web server, right? We don't want to go back and say, hey, app is now equal to something else because that'll break our server, and this, nor should this. So just think that when you're creating variables, ask yourself the question, will the variable ever contain a different value, right? Now, if it's going to contain a different value, then you can't use const. If it's always going to contain that value, then const is the way to go. And in this instance, this seems pretty supportive of using const every step of the way. I know I'm going to mute. The only thing here that I know I might mutate is plants, but I'm never going to say plants is equal to another array. It's still equal to this one. I'm just going to add and remove things from the array. That's all that's ever going to happen. So when you are deciding for your variables, just know, like, if the thing is ever going to change in the actual value that was assigned to it, like a counter you wouldn't make to be a const, because a counter is going to be the value of 1, and then it's going to count. It's going to be 2. It's going to be 3. That value changes, so you'd want that to be a let, right? And we don't really use vars these days anymore, so you'd want it to be a let. But anything that you want to convey that this never changes for the lifetime of the application, const is both a visual way of indicating that and a strict way of conforming to that principle, that this should never change. Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Sweet. All right. Sweet. So let me do this. Let us slack out. Boop, boop, boop. All right, there is the afternoon lab. I'm going to show it here. You will be building a calculator. A calculator, right? So the calculator, I'm just going to go here. You're going to have things like calc will be the calculator that we're hitting. And what do you think? Here's 4 and 4, right? If in the browser the server sends back 8, what do you think is happening there under the hood of calc? I mean, 4 plus 4 is 8, right? So this must be a URL parameter. This must be another URL parameter. And somehow calc here, that URL, that resource, is probably saying, hey, you want me to add. All right, so I get it. I'm going to add. I'm going to grab the first URL parameter, the second URL parameter, add those values, and then send them back. Okay? We're also going to use query strings. Query strings are the question mark right here. So I can say maybe I want you to add something. Right? What's the operation? Add, subtract, multiply. Right? So if I did send 2 values like this, maybe I want to indicate or have the user indicate, I would like you to add that as an operation. I would like you to divide that. I would like you to multiply it, right? So we're giving indications to the server of the type of operations. Okay, so you're going to create a calculator that does that. You're going to be able to tell it you want the action or the operation to be subtraction, addition, and here are the 2 values that you're going to work with in order to perform that, okay? And then there's a couple of bonuses. Figure out how the user client could change the query parameter without typing in the URL bar. And you need to do a bit of research for that. You will. If you have time, you can work on the morning lab. I think most of us did this. And there is a super bonus. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to get it all, but I don't think that this is going to take incredible amount of time. But there was a super bonus in here. What's the super bonus? Here's a super bonus. First contact, you're going to be creating something like X files here. You're going to be building a web server to do X files. I'm just trying to see where they're going. Helper.js. Yeah, I'll hold off on that. If you have questions about the super bonus, just reach out to me. All right, let me see about the breakout rooms. Let's do the breakout rooms. I think I need. Hey, Jerica, can you give me access to the breakout rooms? Oh, there you go. Sweet. She did it. All right, jump in the breakout room.